my stupid body down the rabbit hole. Except instead of ending in a dead end, this one ended in a slight hollow. I don't ever want to describe exactly what I found there. I'm sorry, but I just can't. It was a younger looking woman, naked, covered in lacerations and stab wounds in the fetal position. Her glassy, glazed eyes seemed to look straight through me. I won't go any further than that. I was too scared to scream, and I froze there while dark burgundy stains formed on my jeans. I was sitting there, frozen, and then I heard someone else coming along the path. Have you ever been so scared that for one moment, one insane moment, you truly consider something incredibly stupid as a viable option to escape? That was one of those times. I let out a short, trembling whisper and started moving. Whoever was on the path stopped and then eagerly started moving forward again. I could hear the panting, uneven breaths of a man. A horrible marker of whoever it was getting closer and closer to me by the second. By some wondrous, beautiful miracle, he missed the path leading to the brushy hollow. I heard him moving down past the entrance, dragging something clunky and awkward behind him. I heard clinking noises and the occasional effort to silence the small, sharp noises. I heard a low curse somewhere towards the end of the tunnel, and I blasted out of the undergrowth tunnel like a bullet forcing its way out of a barrel. Cracks, crashes, and obnoxious rustling was all around me as I heard the man sharply intake a breath and begin to move towards me. The deep panting was getting closer and closer to me. I thought I was going to be too slow at exiting, but somehow I exploded out of the entrance, got onto my wobbly, half-asleep legs, and started booking it down the trail. The unknown pursuer was close behind me for a bit, but it seemed like he was too exhausted to chase me at that same speed for long. I know everyone loves to rip on the fact that people always trip in horror movies, but in all honesty, tripping is something I am amazed I didn't do. With adrenaline coursing through me at the speed of Usain Bolt, trying to keep my jello-like legs to move me away from whoever was behind me was like trying to run on water. It felt like an eternity, but I finally reached the main trail running back to the camp and sprinted down it screaming bloody murder. Confused faces looked out from the trees, and I think someone called after me. Reaching the camp was easy, but trying to explain why I woke up half the people in the camp and bolted out of the woods at breakneck speed was harder. When I finally choked the words out to explain, I remember a profound, insidious silence throughout the group of adults waiting at the mouth of the trail. I really don't remember a whole lot from that point on. I do know that the cops were called, and my mother and aunt ran shrieking and wailing along the trail, calling for the other kids to come back to safety. When someone's yelling like that, you don't ignore it. They rounded everyone up in 30 seconds flat and barreled back into the camp. The police found a man out of the woods, a black garbage bag with a plethora of sharp objects, and a saw was found abandoned on the trail. Dried blood. I don't think this is I still have nightmares sometimes.
Damn it.
Breathing heavily down the trying to catch me. Sometimes he's
Oof.
So, this is a story that happened to my mom's friend in Korea about 10 years ago. Every time I hear this story, I still get the chills. My mom's friend lived in an apartment complex in South Korea. She was with a young daughter and her husband during the day. One day, she was with her daughter and got onto the elevator. When she got off, she noticed that there was a man wearing a cap with a yellow rain coat, and he kept his head low so that she couldn't really see his face. She immediately felt really uneasy, and she made her daughter stand to her side furthest away from the man. What made her feel even more uncomfortable was that when she pressed the button for her phone, there was no other lit number. She noticed that he was carrying something wrapped inside of a paper close to his side. Things started to click in my mom's friend's head, and she started to panic and decided to take out her cell phone and pretend like she was calling home to her husband, who was obviously really not at home and My mom's friend quickly picked up her daughter and slid open her door's passcode saying, "This is usually how people get into their homes in Korea." And she started to frantically put in her key code. But the problem was that the buttons would make noise, so the man knew that no one was going to answer the door for her. And he turned around and started to run back towards her. My mom's friend, at this point, was practically screaming, and when she finally got her door to open, the first thing she did was throw her daughter in through the door. When she got in herself, she saw that the man was pretty much inches from the door, but she managed to shut it and lock it before he could wedge his hand or a weapon into the door. Afterwards, looking through the door's peephole, she saw that the man was walking away back towards the elevator. Several months later, my mom's friend was watching the news and there was a coverage on the capture of a serial killer named Yoo Young-chul, who used to kill a lot of prostitutes. She told my mom that she would never forget the dread she felt when she saw the two familiar yellow rainbows that he was wearing when apprehended. So that's the story about how my mom's friend was almost killed by a serial killer. I'll leave this Wikipedia page in the description for anyone who's curious. When I was 19, I worked for a company that outsourced labor to rural areas of Australia. Basically what you did was tell them when you were available and they'd send you to a remote farm for a few weeks where you do whatever they needed done. It was hard work and long hours, good pay and good fun if you got into a nice worker. When this occurred, I was working on a large property. I was told it covered roughly the same landmass as the entire state of Maryland. It was about 9 hours from Sydney City, and the property itself was about 40 minutes from the nearest town. In short, it was in the middle of nowhere. I was working at the farm clearing the land with 3 guys playing I was talking to my neighbor, being super close while walking out with him. He was pretty laid back, which generally really good for us. Summer in particular was very hot, and the woods was hot. So one day when the temperature hit above 38 degrees Celsius, which is about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, Jeremy decided to give us the afternoon off. He said he knew of a water hole on the farm about a 25-minute drive north. I was keen for a swim, but the other guys just wanted to relax for the Arvo. So him and I hopped in one of the work trucks and started heading across the property. It was mostly wide, empty expanses with a few clumps of scattered bushland. Jeremy wasn't much of a talker, so we drove more or less in silence. After about 20 minutes, however, he suddenly perked up and jabbed me in the ribs. "Do you see that over there? Below the 2 dead trees?" I should mention here that if you're not familiar with inland areas, particularly those in Australia, they're brown or red and mostly flat and bland, meaning any bright colors stick out like a sore thumb. So you can imagine our Just to state a couple things before this starts, these entries are all written by the same person. There will be a transition on screen between each story. I wasn't sure where else to post these stories, so I figured I'd share them here. I've been a search and rescue officer for a few years now, and along the way I've seen some things that I think you guys will be interested in. I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people. Most of the time they just wander off the path or slip down a small cliff and they can't find their way back. The majority of them have heard the old "stay where you are" thing and they don't wander off, but I've had 2 cases where that didn't happen. Both bother me a lot and I use them as motivation to search even harder on the missing persons cases I get called on. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds and in that time, both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly and when we asked her where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by the bear man. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted to play with her brother for a while, and that's the last she saw of her brother. He was riding on the shoulders of the bear man. mother, her daughter had climbed up a tree to get a better view of the forest, and she'd never come back down. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name before they called for help. Again, searched everywhere. We never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she could have possibly gone. Neither her mother or grandpa saw her come down.
Round 2, fight!
I've been out on my own searching for the canine, and they've tried to lead me straight up cliffs. Not hills, not even rock faces. Straight, sheer cliffs with no possible handholds. It's always fast, and in those cases, we usually find the person on the other side of the cliff, or miles away from where the canine had led us. I'm sure there's an explanation, but it's sort of strange. One particularly sad case involved a body. A 9-year-old girl held out in a big pit and got impaled on a dead tree at the base. It was a complete freak accident, but I'll never forget the sound her mother made when we told her what happened. She saw the body bag being loaded into an ambulance. She let out the most haunting, heartbroken wail I've ever heard. It was like her whole life was crashing down around her, and a part of her had died with her daughter. I heard from another search and rescue officer that she killed herself a few weeks after it happened. She couldn't live with the loss of her daughter.
Round 1, fight!
I was teamed up with another search and rescue officer because we received multiple reports of bears. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get to where we figured he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevice with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he got to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment, and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He was crawling the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. It was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night climbing down the mountain and letting out the most horrible screams. That story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there. One of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me involved a search for a young woman who'd gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large rotted log. She was missing her shoes and her backpack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us back to the base. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking why that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to the base, the more agitated this woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She said she wasn't going to go with him, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't know how to describe it. When we were within sight of base, the woman turns to me, and her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human being can open them. She touches my shoulder and says, he says to tell you to speak up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck. I have a very small scar on the base of my neck. It's mostly hidden in my collar. I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear, and I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say I was really happy when we left that area that night. probably the weirdest story I have. Now, I don't know if this is true in every search and rescue unit.
Damn.
Unspoken regular thing we run into. You can try asking about it with other search and rescue officers, but even if they know what you're talking about, they probably won't say anything about it. We've been told not to talk about it by our superiors, and at this point, we've gotten so used to it that it doesn't even seem weird anymore. On just about every case where we're really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30 or 40 miles, at some point, we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took the stairs in your house, cut them out, in the forest. I asked about it the first time I saw some, and the other officer just told me not to worry about it, and that it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same thing. I wanted to go check them out, but I was told very seriously that I should never go near any of them. I just I have a lot more stories, and I suppose if anyone's interested, I'll share some of them. If anyone has any theories about it, let me know. So I logged back on tonight.
Oh, I should have known better. Oh my god, bro.
Seems to have generated. First off, I'll address that you guys
Message.
There's been an overwhelming amount of people mentioning the similarity between some of my stories and those of
Yeah, we
David
can do that.
Pollard's. I assure you, I'm not trying to rip him off in
Let
any
me
way.
get us out of here real quick.
Respect to the guy. He's actually what inspired me to write this because I can verify a lot of the things that he talks about. We do have a lot
You kept
of
on
these
running back
strange
with this
missing
dude, like
persons
right quick.
cases,
Like I
and most
just
of the time
really.
they aren't solved.
That's like this
Either
close.
that, or we find them in places they have no business being in. I personally haven't been on many calls like that, but I'll share a few that I've seen and a story my friend told me that relates to this. There was a lot of feedback about the stairs, so I'll touch on that briefly here, and I'll also tell the story. They come in a variety of shapes, sizes, styles, and conditions. Some are pretty dilapidated, just ruins, but others are brand new. I saw one set that came from the house. They were metal and spiral, almost old-fashioned. The stairs don't go infinitely, or farther than I can see, but some sets are taller than others. Like I said before, just imagine this stairs in your house, as if someone cut and pasted them in the middle of nowhere. I don't have any stories personally. It never really occurred to me to try again after the first time, and I don't really feel like risking my
Stream
job
one.
over
That means
it.
I gotta
I'll try again in the
ready.
future. I can't really promise anything. A few people expressed confusion about the guy who ran into the man with no face. Just to clarify, when the climber ascended and reached the top of this peak, he saw another man in a parka and ski pants. This was the man with no face. Sorry about the confusing wording of that story. I'll try to avoid that in the future. Alright, on to the new story. Go. I'd say about half the calls I get are related to that. The others are rescue calls, people who fall down fire. You wouldn't believe how often this happens. Mostly get bitten or stung by animals or insects. We're a tight team, and we have veterans who are excellent at finding signs of lost people. That's what makes these cases where we never find any trace of them so frustrating. One in particular was upsetting for all of us. We did find a trace of them, but it just led to more questions than answers. An older man had been hiking alone
send
on
him
a
the friend
well-established
request if
trail,
I knew how to
but
do
his
that.
wife called to say that he hadn't come home when he should have. Apparently, he had a history of seizures, and she was worried that he hadn't taken his medication and had suffered one out on the trail. Before you ask, I have no idea why he thought it was okay to go out alone or why she didn't go with him. I don't ask about that kind of thing because past a certain point, it really doesn't matter. Someone is missing and it's my job to find them. We went out in our standard search formation, and it wasn't long before one of our vets found signs that the guy had gone off the trail. We grouped up and
Combat
followed
and
him,
casual
spreading out in a
versus
fan to
private.
make sure we
One
were covering
versus
as much
one.
ground as possible. Suddenly, a call comes over the radio telling us to all head back to the vet's location and we have to come right away, because this usually means the missing person is injured and we need a full team to help get them to safety. We meet back up and the vet is just standing at the base of the tree with his hands on the side of his head. I ask my buddy what's going on and he points up into the branches of the tree. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing, but there's a walking stick dangling from a branch at least 30 feet off the ground. The little strap thing on the handle has been looped around the branch and it's just hanging there. There's no way the guy could have tossed it up that far, and we don't see any signs that he's still in the area. We call up into the tree, but it's obvious no one's in it. We're all just sort of left scratching our heads. We keep searching for the guy, but we never find him. We even bring our canines out, but they lose his scent long before the tree. Eventually, the search is called off because there are other calls we have to attend to, and past a certain point, there's not much we can
Are
do.
we still doing this?
The guy's wife called us every day for months, asking if we'd found her husband, and it was heartbreaking to hear her get more and more hopeless each time. I'm not sure why this call in particular was so upsetting, but I think it was just the sheer improbability of it. That, and the questions that were raised. How the hell did this guy's cane end up there? Did someone kill him and toss that up there as some weird trophy? We did our best to find him, but it was almost like a taunt.
Oh,
We still
alright.
talk about that one from time to time. Missing kids are the most heartbreaking. Doesn't matter what the circumstances they go missing under, it's never easy, and we always dread the ones that we find deceased. It's not common, but it does happen. David Paulides talks a lot about kids search and rescue teams find in places that they shouldn't be, or couldn't be. I can honestly say I've heard about this kind of thing happening more than I've seen it, but I'll share one of the ones that I think about a lot that I witnessed personally. A mother and her 3 kids were out for a picnic in an area of the park that has a small lake. One is 6, one is 5, and the other is about 3. She's watching them all really closely, and picnic in an area of the park that has a small lake. One is 6, one is 5, and the other is about 3. She's watching them all really closely, and
According to her, she never lets them out of her sight at any time. She never saw anyone else in the area either, which is important. She packs their stuff up and they start to head back to the parking area. Now, this lake is only about 2 miles into the woods, and it's on a very clearly established trail. It's almost impossible to get lost from the parking area to it, unless you're deliberately going off the path like an imbecile. Her kids are walking in
I'm
front
gonna,
of her.
go
and
grab
she
some
what
tea
sounds
right
like someone
quick.
coming up the path
So-
behind her. She turns around, and in the 4 or so seconds she's not looking, her 5-year-old son vanishes. She figures he's stepped off the trail to go pee or something, and she asks her 2 other kids where he went. They both tell her that a big man with a scary face came out of the woods next to them, took the kid's hand, and led him into the woods. The 2 remaining kids don't seem upset. In fact, she says later that it seems like they've been drugged. They're sort of spacey and fuzzy. So of course, she freaks out, starts frantically looking around the area for her kid. She's screaming his name, and she says at one point she thinks she heard him answer her. Now, obviously she can't go blindly running into the woods. She's got the other 2 kids, so she calls the police and sends us out immediately. We respond and we start the search for him. Over the course of this search, which spans miles, we never find a single trace of the kid. The canines can't pick up any scent. We don't find any clothing or broken bushes or literally anything that would signify a child being out there. Of course, there's suspicion about the mother for a while. but
Casual
it's pretty
versus
clear that she's completely destroyed by the whole thing. We look for this kid for weeks with a lot of volunteer help, but eventually the search peters out and we had to move on. The volunteers keep searching though, and one day we get a call on the radio letting us know that a body has been found and needs to be recovered. They tell us the location, and none of us can believe it. We figure it has to be a different kid, but we go out there, about 15 miles from the site where he vanished, and sure enough, we find the body of the kid we've been looking for. I have been trying to figure out how this kid got where he did ever since we found him, and I've never come up with an answer. A volunteer just happened to be in the area because he figured he might as well look in places no one else would think to on the off chance the body had been dumped. He comes to the base of a tall, rocky slope, and halfway up, he sees something. He looks through his binoculars, and sure enough, it's the body of a little boy stuffed in a little opening in the rock. He recognizes the color of the kid's shirt, so he knows right away that it's the missing boy. That's when he calls it in and we're dispatched. It took us almost an hour to get his body down, and none of us could believe what we were seeing. Not only was this kid 15 miles from where he'd started, there was no possible way he could have gotten up there on his own. This slope is treacherous, and it's hard for even us to climb on it with our climbing gear. A 5-year-old boy had no way of getting up there, of that I'm certain. Not only that, but the kid doesn't have a scratch on him. His shoes are gone, but his feet aren't damaged or dirty, so it wasn't as if an animal dragged him up there, and from what I can tell, he hasn't been dead that long. He'd been out there over a month by that point, and it looked like he'd only been dead for, at most, a day or two. The whole thing was unbelievably strange and was one of the most disconcerting calls I've ever been on. We found out later that the coroner determined the kid had died from exposure. He'd frozen to death, probably late at night 2 days before we found him. There were no suspects and no answers. To date, it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. One of my first jobs as a trainee was a search op for a 4-year-old kid that had
Whenever you
gotten
finish, just send
separated
it,
from his
and I'll
mom.
just leave the
This was one of
match.
those cases where we
Send
knew we
invite,
were gonna
alright.
find him because the dogs were on a
Private
strong
one
scent trail,
versus
and we saw
one.
clear signs that he was in the area. We ended up finding him in a berry patch about half a mile from where he'd been last seen. The kid wasn't even aware that he'd wandered off that far. One of the vets brought him back, which I was glad for because I'm not really good with kids, and I find it hard to talk to them and keep them company. As my trainer and I are headed back, she decides to take me on a detour to show me one of the hot spots where we tend to find missing people. In 2008, I worked at a retail clothing store with my girlfriend Chelsea.
Alright, Trump,
We
let's
were
do
both
this shit.
18 years old and tried to work as many shifts together as possible to maximize our time together because my grandfather had recently purchased a Dodge Sprinter van for his business, and my car was being serviced overnight, so I had to drive the van. Chelsea and I loved the nights we got to take the van, because it usually had the back seats installed and the tinted windows meant we could have some privacy, which is great for teens who still live at home.
Round one,
We only
fight!
had one row of seats in the back. I begin to doze off almost immediately in my bedroom. I lived with my grandparents who built a house to accommodate for my grandfather's aging parents suffering from Alzheimer's.
It's like old
my
time. Yeah,
great-grandparents,
we'll see.
So
We'll
that
see.
they didn't have to go into a home. The driveway runs parallel to a daylight basement that has 2 garage doors, an entrance door, and the back
Round
doors to
one,
my bedroom.
fight!
I'm following basically asked why the hell I was running around outside at this time of night.
Round 2, fight!
Sleeping and she knew that I was outside the van. My great-grandmother's bedside sits above me. From her
Yeah, it's kind of like old times.
lights are all flashing, and I remember
It's
that
official.
specifically because
You
I'd never
suck,
seen a
Shao
car alarm
Kahn
do that.
wins.
We silence the alarm and start looking around. My grandfather says he thinks a deer may have run out of the woods in the dark and hit the van. I don't say anything as we investigate.
I should be able
When I
to hear
reach
you.
the back of the van, I notice the door is
You poking a hell of a lot, bro.
Hey, it's what I
explains the
do.
alarm. The van has a feature that if the vehicle alarm is
Round
the door
one,
is opened
fight!
somehow from inside. So the inside lights. I see was in the van with me. I must have left the van escaping the cold. Someone with a more
Round 2, fight!
Oh shit. Ah, GG.
That's a beautiful view of the farm. We all figured, what's the point? The summer was so much
Man, we need to get more sets in like this. We used to get a set in every week, man.
for a walk.
Yeah, that was a while ago. I usually be on Overwatch
I
now.
absolutely adored the feeling of being alone and was enjoying the freedom of all of
Do what? What'd you say?
Yes, I'm usually on
Fall
Overwatch.
eventually rolled around and
I tried it. I didn't really care for it.
the morning and afternoon.
Round two, fight!
Which had a huge window. The view of the woods
Switch the spawn.
GG's game, I gotta get in bed, man. I gotta work.
Oh yeah, we're done. GG.
GG's done.
The only thing that was strange was her footsteps sounded a lot heavier than they usually do. The noise stopped very quickly and I was able to fall back asleep. In the morning, my mom asked me and my two sisters, the 9-year-old and the 12-year-old ones, if we woke up last night to make food. We all said no, and then I asked if it was my oldest sister. My mom told me that she stayed at a friend's house last night and then thought it was probably a dog
versus.
I knew better than that, though. I was terrified. I knew I heard unfamiliar footsteps. That night, I had a lot of trouble sleeping. I still felt like someone was watching me. Eventually, I had fallen asleep but woke up around 2:30 a.m. I heard noises in the house again. It was the same footsteps I had heard before. I stayed in my bed and felt paralyzed. I rolled over and faced the window, hoping that if someone came in my room, they'd think I was asleep. The noises stopped and I closed my eyes as hard as I could. I told myself I was just imagining things and that monsters aren't real. One evening, about 8 years ago, it was pouring outside and we get a call from an elderly woman. She called in and said that she was hearing footsteps in her house and she thought there was a ghost inside because she regularly heard the sound of someone walking upstairs. But she lived alone. We went there just to check it out and make sure everything was okay. She stayed on the line with the 911 operator because she was really scared. About 3 minutes after she initially called in, she said that there was actually a man standing outside in her backyard, staring at her through her sliding glass door. Petrified, the woman froze in that spot and continued to stare directly at the man. For the next minute or two, she said that he was just standing there, still as could be, staring at her. Eventually, the man turned. About 12 minutes after the call first came in, the other officer went to the backyard, still hiding out for we set off to do a quick scoop before we left and make sure the house was all about 5 years
Final
out of
round.
school.
Fight.
One night, I got a call from a lady at a residence in town. She was freaking out, heavy breathing, scared. I took a moment and from the sound of her voice, this was not going to be a call. I sat up straight. Not loud.
Damn it. Oh, okay. All right. I got something for that.
I don't.
And I know there's a ghost right in the other room. I can hear it right now.
The sergeant was enough to call, and why I sent him and 2 other cars without explanation. Normally, you'd send 1 car to something like that. It's suspicious activity, I told him. What activity?
Okay.
He demanded over the radio, which was a fair question. Sir, the caller is claiming there is someone in the house and she believes it to be a ghost. Silence on the air for about a minute. 10-4 is all he said. By the time they got there, the ghost was gone and the poor lady was a freaked out mess. And she kept apologizing for calling us. But it was real, she kept repeating. The officers later told me that her sincerity actually freaked them out a lot, and when they searched the house, guns drawn, even they were scared. I was called to a home of an older woman, mid-60s I'd say. She reported that there were ghosts in her attic or basement every night for the past week or so. So I go in and I don't hear anything. I check the basement and the attic as she shows me around. I shine my light in the attic, but I don't see anything. The basement had lights on, but still nothing to be seen. A week goes by and I get called back to her house again. This time, I'm working a night shift. I go in and check the basement. Nothing. I check the attic and there's a man with ragged, torn clothes huddled in a corner. Apparently, he was climbing in her window on cold nights. While there were no ghosts, it really did freak me the fuck out to see someone crouched in her attic. We arrested him, but dropped the charges since what he needed was help more than a record. He was homeless, and we helped him find a shelter to go to for future needs. I haven't seen him since. It's my job to help people, and all that, and I try to take it to heart. I did my best to help both the resident and the trespasser. Reporter named Bob would always show up at any major police activity from the police station. Did car runs, fires, anything worth maybe reporting in the local paper. Everybody in the force knew Bob too. He was always around at least once or twice a week at Now, Bob was a reporter himself. He would message people by clicking behind them. People would react. Everybody liked Bob. He wanted to be for the next couple of weeks. He kept talking about seeing Bob at car washes, all the same stuff he used to do. this from civilians and members of the police. He and my aunt we asked him what the hell happened. He had to sit down, take his breath, compose himself, and start to outline. Never rattled by anything. He said, my aunt was sitting on the couch and watching TV. He kept scratching out his ear over and over. The problem was, I turned around just in case to see their bedroom door open. Jumped up and started cussing and got my aunt's attention to return to the eye contact. He walked across the living room and out their front door. He closed the door behind himself and was gone. My uncle got himself and ran outside, gun drawn,
Automatically
for
back
Bob,
up.
but
Like, I
he
don't
was
get it.
gone. And at that point, they ran over to our place. We went over there and didn't see anything, but my aunt and uncle stayed at our place that night. At work the next day, all the guys on the force were giving my uncle lots of "we told you so." People around town said they saw Bob D show up at police scenes for at least another 2 to 3 months. My dad saw him in our dark room in our basement with a friend. He was flicking their ears in the dark. During the 3rd month, people that saw him kept saying he was looking worse and worse. My uncle saw him 2 more times, each time confirming that he was looking more and more worn down. My dad concluded that he was decomposing and his ghost was reflecting that process. Now, every time I hear him, I get goosebumps. One seemed to have we were told to I drove by around wide open. I know that the back door was not open when I drove by it earlier. Looking at the snow on the ground around the house, there were no footprints. So I said, what the hell? I got a dispatch, called them on investigating an open door at that time. I walked through the flashlight. Inside, the house is obviously dead. Walls have been torn down with debris piled everywhere. Since there were no signs in the snow around the with all that dust on the floor not showing, I chalk it up to the wind, or maybe the door was open. I was about to secure the door when I heard a loud thump from upstairs, so I enter the house and yell out, "Come downstairs!" Then more of what sounds like kids playing. I tell dispatch that it sounds like there are kids in the house and start making my way through the kitchen into the living room where the stairs are, all the while cautiously checking the main floor. 2 more times I hear something upstairs, but since I've had no response, I start thinking maybe it's an animal. Still, I hear what I swear was kids laughing. I head upstairs and it gets all quiet. The upstairs is relatively small with a hallway at the top of the stairs that has 1 bedroom on the right, 1 straight ahead at the end of the hall, and a bedroom on the left. As I get to the top of the stairs, I hear a thump in the bedroom to the left. I carefully peek around the corner, and it's an empty room with a small pile of plaster and wood debris in the middle. No kidding, sitting on top of the pile of debris was a page torn out of a child's book with a picture of a police officer on it. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. I got out of that room, quickly cleared the other rooms upstairs, and got the fuck out of there. I told dispatch nobody was in the house, I locked the back door, and never went back in there again.
Spawn. Sub-Zero. Shirala Fire.
My uncle works for dispatch in my town, and he recently told my family of the weirdest call he's ever gotten. He says that he had received a call from a landline one night, and when he answered it, there was only static on the other end. This happened 2 more times. Finally, he calls a squad to go check out the address from the caller ID. When the cops get there and walk into the house, they immediately saw that there was a dead body. The person had been dead for 5 months. The craziest part about it was that there was no electricity or any other utility working. So there was no way they should have been able to get those calls into dispatch. But if they hadn't, who knows how long that person's body would have stayed there. Not my call, but my dad served for 25 years. One night, he gets a call from a woman who says her neighbor has made a pact with the devil. The woman calling is about 35 and a religious wacko. The neighbor called about 75 at the time. My dad went over and knocked on the door, and the old lady answered, all happy, nice place, decorated the same way for the past 50 years. She invites my dad in without even asking why he came, and makes him some coffee and asks how his day was. Naturally, at this point my dad is wondering what the hell the call was about, but it came clear soon. At some point, my dad realizes he isn't the only person she's talking to, and that this lady thinks her apartment is full of people. My dad thanks her for the coffee, and she tells him to come back at any time. The whole time she was talking, he was writing down the names of the people she was talking to, and he does some research on her when he gets back. Turns out, she was talking to family members who were all dead. She had a daughter, 3 sons, a brother, and a husband, all dead, and she had no family and no friends. She hadn't spoken to another person in years. Her groceries were delivered, and she rarely left her apartment. Over the next 19 years, my dad took care of her. My sister and I came over all the time and just sat there and talked with her. She taught me how to cook. Over the years, she stabilized and stopped talking to her dead relatives. She just needed people to live with. She actually lived until she was about 94, and she died in the guest room of my parents' house, since it had become harder to take care of her from a distance as she got closer to the end. She was like a grandma for us. A call goes out for reported screaming, and it's mid-January. My father and another officer respond to find a known deranged individual. Very long rap sheet, and has been in and out of psychiatric care for years. Sitting on the front porch holding a double-sided wood-splitting axe. Steam is coming up off the grass, and there are chunks lying all over the lawn. Upon interviewing the suspect, he admits that he and a friend were playing poker. The suspect was losing nearly every hand, and he came to the conclusion that his friend was a haint, which is Southern for ghost, and he was cheating him. The suspect grabbed the axe, chased his friend outside, and hacked him into dozens of pieces, thus causing the warm blood to create steam on the grass. My dad tells the suspect that he needs to get into the police car because it's hate-proof. He said the suspect dropped the axe and sprinted into the back seat while thanking them for helping him. So pretty much my father convinced an axe murderer to get into his cop car. I recently started working as a security guard, and one of my first assignments was the graveyard shift at a new housing development outside of town. Over the course of the 3 nights I worked there, I had some pretty bizarre things happen. While doing my patrols through the neighborhood, I would often see people watching me from the upper windows of the vacant houses. But when I would enter the house to investigate, they would be empty.
One of the first things on my to-do list when I arrived on site was to go through the 8 model homes next to the real estate office and turn off all the lights and TVs. The first night, things went smoothly, but the following night, as I was making my way through the kitchen of the 4th house, I heard the light switch click and all the lights in the kitchen went out. It wasn't a power surge or a blown breaker, as all the appliances were still on and all the little green lights underneath the light switches were still lit. A few minutes later, I heard another click and the lights came back on, followed by the lights in the next house going out, but the TV remained on. By the time I made my way to the next house, the lights were back on, but the TV was in standby, which is only possible by hitting the button on the front. As I was finishing up in the last house, I looked out the window and saw that the 2nd house and 3rd house were lit up again. The 3rd night, the light situation got weirder. The lights would either turn on or off in a room as I entered it, and in one house, as I entered the kitchen, the hood light over the stove turned on. As I turned to look at it, I heard a series of clicks come from the 2nd floor, as if someone was running through the house, turning on all the lights. When I went up there, sure enough, many of the lights I had turned off were back on. In another house, a desk lamp turned itself back on 3 times. Another lamp in the same house that had a dimmer slowly started lighting up right in front of me. Now, for the worst of the events. As I was walking past one of the construction sites, I saw what appeared to be a skunk walk behind the porta potty. When it walked back out, however, it appeared to look more like a black Shih Tzu. It proceeded to change size, shape, and color several more times right in front of me. A Doberman, Bloodhound, Tan Mastiff, then finally a yellow lab, before running off into the dark. I'm willing to concede all of these can be chalked up to my mind and eyes playing tricks, or a timer gone haywire. I was assured there wasn't one, but this last one defies logical explanation. As I was walking back to the office around 2:30, I glanced up at one of the houses. As I did, something hit me between my left head and shoulder, hard enough to stagger me. I weigh 250 pounds, so I'm not exactly little. It felt as if someone were walking the opposite direction on the sidewalk and shoved their way past me. I have since asked my supervisors not to assign me to that site ever again.
Online. Casual versus.
This happened 8 years ago when I was a sophomore in high school. My Urbex friends and I were on a bike ride looking for cool places to explore in a relatively dilapidated area when we discovered a really creepy cave, which we later learned was an old abandoned cement mine. We did some mild exploring that first day, but quickly realized it would require more gear to thoroughly explore, like flashlights, respirators, etc. About a week later, 5 of us came back with the proper gear and a camera to see what we could find in the mine. We discovered there was basically one main shaft that sloped downward and deeper into the earth, so we followed that main route. It was wide enough for a car to drive down and was pretty well graded, so the walking was easy. There were many rooms, old machinery, and rusting equipment off of this main shaft, but we mostly avoided it in the beginning. We were trying not to get lost or confused.
Well,
Along the way, the walls were littered with the classic abandoned graffiti. X was here, swastikas, initials and dates, phallic drawings,